A long time ago in Western New York, a guy named Joseph Smith decided, like, hey, I'm just going to start a cult. And he magically produced these golden plates that allegedly no one else was able to see. Only he could see it because God said it was just him. It was just for him. And these plates had a brand new book or two of the Bible that basically said that Jesus at some point between being alive and going up to heaven that he transported to North America to witness and evangelize to the Native Americans. And there's all that story and stuff in there, but that it contained like his real teachings, not the other silly stuff for the Jews and the religion, loosely using that term, a religion of Mormonism was born. And now they've got their special underwear. They're not allowed to drink hot drinks, so they just drink all the Diet Coke because they got to get their caffeine somehow. They got like their weird kind of afterlife structure where you get transported to different planets based on how good of a Mormon you were. All this kind of silly stuff. Real silly group of people. But to their credit, they are the nicest people. They're just affable to no end. And look, that makes it kind of like it makes it a little bit conflicting to just go so hard at them for how silly their history has been. But then you look at the history they've had and it is ridiculous. And so we are starting a 2-part series this week with some stories from the Mormons.
Our Weird World.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and I am clearly in a better mood. I even gave you a cold open, which I don't normally do because I'm not feeling that creative, but I'm out of the blues and I'm way up in the manic now. I'm not bipolar, but it's the ebb and flow of how it goes. I'll even back out. It's fine. Also, I'm going to play golf later today, and I'm excited for that because I'm an old man now and I enjoy golf. So that's beside the point. Really excited to share these stories with you. 3 stories today and then another handful next week. But today we are looking at the Church of the Firstborn of the Lamb of God, Addam Swapp, and our first story after the jump of the Morrisite War. So we're going all the way back to 1857 when a guy named Joseph Morris began receiving messages from God that he was the 7th angel as outlined in the book of Revelation, which was really convenient because if you were Mormon, basically you could just start saying that God was giving you messages too, and like people kind of had to believe you because why would you lie about those sorts of things? So Morris wrote to Brigham Young, who at this point in the Mormons' history had taken over from Joseph Smith. Brigham Young, who probably by now was getting pretty annoyed of people claiming that they were also getting messages from God. But Brigham Young was basically asked by Morris to recognize these revelations as being totally legitimate and to validate him. Young never responded to Morris's letter, but Morris didn't care, and he began amassing a group of followers that came to be known as the Morrisites. So 4 years later, in 1861, Morris was finally excommunicated from the Mormon Church by the 3rd and 4th church presidents John Taylor and Wilford Woodruff, because, again, he's like still claiming that he is this angel from the book of Revelation, and nobody's buying it, except all of his followers. And so Morris... the next year, he organized the Church of the Firstborn, which, if you look back in various parts of history. There was another Church of the Firstborn, which we'll probably cover later. They did some silly things too. But Morris organized his own Church of the Firstborn and told his followers to gather at Kington Fort, which was an abandoned outpost on the Weber River, Utah, maybe? Probably Utah. Almost certainly it was Utah. He told the Morrisites that the second coming was totally, for sure, 100% about to happen. Classic cult leader stuff. And that they didn't even need to bother planting crops that year. That's how quickly it was going to come. Didn't even have time to plant crops and harvest them because they weren't going to need them because Jesus was coming back. And so some members even took it a step further by trampling the crops that had already been planted just to show that, like, yeah, we believe you. And why would you lie to us? No one has ever lied about Jesus coming back before. And certainly not someone who's claiming to be the angel from the book of Revelation. He's totally got it right. Well, by the spring of 1862, Jesus had not yet returned and the fort was running out of food. Morris, as cult leaders tend to do, continued to change the date for Jesus's return, but every time the new date came, Jesus still wasn't there. And so each time a new return date came and went, a handful of members finally had enough and packed up their things and left. Things got to the point where three men, William Jones, John Jensen, and Lars Geertsen, hijacked a caravan of wheat headed to Kaysville, Utah, because the cult needed food. And thinking the men were going to keep the wheat for themselves, the Morrisites then sent another group after them to prevent them from actually even bringing it back. The three original men, Jones, Jensen, and Geertsen, were easily captured and held prisoner back at the fort, quote, to be tried by the Lord when he came. So already building up a honey-do list for Jesus when he comes back. It's, it's like, Jesus, welcome back. First things first, need to set up a little kangaroo court here. These three men, they hijacked a caravan, stole a lot of wheat, judge them to eternal damnation, please. Thanks. So they are held in the fort. But Geertsen, he quickly escapes, and the other two men's wives then petitioned the territorial government for help. When word reached John F. Kinney that the Morrisites were illegally holding prisoners, he issued a writ of habeas corpus, which is basically just a fancy government letter, and ordered it to be read aloud to the Morrisites, who in turn refused to listen to that letter because they don't think they are under any sort of federal or territorial jurisdiction. They're their own thing. They're not participating in this because Jesus is coming back soon. So what's the point? After another writ was ignored 3 weeks later, Kinney asked the territorial governor to then activate the militia to go arrest all of the Morrisites. And so on June 13th, as many as 1,000 militiamen arrived at the fort to find that the Morrisites had already barricaded themselves inside. Robert T. Burton, a U.S. Marshal in charge of leading the militia, sent a message requesting the group's surrender within 30 minutes or else. When Morris got the message, he conveniently and magically and divinely received another revelation from God that told him that the militia was going to totally be destroyed and that no one should worry about anything, which is what you do when you're backed into a corner and you have no solution for anything. Just like, oh my God, I gotta get another vision from Jesus. Oh, it's fine, guys. The militia's going to be destroyed. We don't need to do anything. It's fine. Just ignore it. Well, when the 30-minute timer expired, Burton ordered 2 warning shots to be fired at the fort. Unfortunately, and I don't know how you do this, you don't even, if you're going to fire a warning shot, just fire it straight up in the air, dude. But instead, the second shot actually ricocheted off the ground and somehow flew inside an open port inside the fort, killing 2 women and shattering the jaw of another, which is a crazy shot. That is an insane shot. It's completely random and coincidental, but insane nonetheless. And in response, the Morrisites thought that the war has started. So they opened fire and they killed 19-year-old militiaman Jared Smith. But after heavy rains prevented any further fighting, the negotiations for the surrender resumed on June 15th, with Burton, the U.S. Marshal, riding up to the fort to begin the talks. When Morris attempted to walk up to Burton to have a chat just to see what they could do, whatever, Burton wasn't having any of it. He shot Morris, which is always an effective negotiation tactic. And that caused both sides to start shooting at each other again. 2 more women in the fort were shot and killed. And in the end, Burton took 90 men prisoner and marched them back to Salt Lake City over 30 miles away. Somehow, in all of this, 7 Morrisites were convicted of second-degree murder, and another 66 were convicted of resistance. 3 days later, the entire group was pardoned by Stephen S. Harding, the new territorial governor, and the group scattered throughout the West, with most ending up in the town of Racetrack, Montana, where they still have a house of worship actually still standing out kind of in the prairie of Montana. You could visit if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, but yeah, like none of the marshals were tried as far as I could tell for like killing, what was it, like 4 different Morrisite women? Like, just crazy. But that is the small story of the Morrisite War. Our next story here began in 1890 when the Mormon Church abandoned their philosophy on polygamy and excommunicated any Mormon who wanted to continue to practice it. Most of the dissenters, most of the people who wanted to continue being polygamous, moved south to Mexico, who that country at that time didn't care how many wives you had. Like, they weren't pro-polygamy, but they also just didn't care. Like, they had bigger problems probably to worry about. So one of those families was the LeBaron family, led by Alma Dayer LeBaron Sr. And so he moved his clan to Chihuahua in 1924 and started a farm named Colonia LeBaron. So Alma ended up dying in 1951, and his son Joel took his place as the family leader. And so, thanks to silly Mormon politics, several of Alma's sons, including Joel, believed that they were the true divine successor to Joseph Smith to lead the Mormon church because they held the priesthood keys of authority, whatever those are, and because their great-grandfather, Benjamin F. Johnson, was one of Joseph Smith's closest confidants. And this has commonly been a problem in the Mormon church. Everyone believes they are the true successor to Joseph Smith and the next true Mormon leader / Messiah / president. It's like there's no rhyme or reason for it. Like, if you have some tangential connection to Joseph Smith, you just believe in your heart that God wants you, or at least has divinely chosen you to be the next Mormon leader. It's insane. So in 1955, Joel LeBaron founded the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Times and made his brother Ervil the commander of Colonia LeBaron while Joel went and ran their new church in Salt Lake City. So there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, why the long name for the church? This is a common theme in Mormonism. Anytime these wackos break off into their own splinter group, they name their new church just this insanely long name. The Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Times. And it keeps going because there will be other splinter groups here in just a second with equally long names. It just makes no sense. So even though the LeBaron family, they'd moved down to Mexico to keep practicing polygamy, Joel returns to the United States, returns to Salt Lake City to start his new church, which he thinks is like true Mormonism. Well, by 1967, Ervil LeBaron began to believe that Joel wasn't really Mormoning the right way and advocated for the return of the concept of blood atonement, which was basically this thing that stated that sinners literally needed to bleed in order to secure a place in heaven. So however that looked, it was probably like some sort of ritual, some sort of ceremony where you bleed yourself for a certain amount of time and that atones for your sins, and that's what gets you into heaven. Insane. Let's just go ahead and say that right now. Just insane. Like, just say, like, it's no different than just saying, oh, you got to poop to go to heaven. Like, just, getting rid of something. Like, blood is just blood, dude. Like, there's nothing special about it. And yet centuries and millennia of human tradition has made it special for some reason. Like, it's not. It's just liquid. It's just a type of liquid that, sure, it keeps us alive, but something has to. Water also keeps us alive. And it's like not as special unless it's like holy water. Anyway, like there's just so many things wrong with all of this that I truly don't even know where to start with my criticism of it. It's just, it's like a buffet of stupid that, that I can't pick from. I don't know what to put on my plate first. So Ervil LeBaron, he wants to bring back blood atonement. He doesn't think that Joel's new church is truly Mormoning the right way, but Ervil also wanted to take it a step further, and rather than just bleeding for the atonement of your sins, he thought that sinners should be required to die for literally any crime, any sin that Ervil thought deserved death. And this went beyond murder. All right. This went like, I don't think I have the list of things that he thought deserved death, but it was a lot. And it was like silly things too. Like, like theft. Sure. Bad. Deserve to die? Probably not. Infidelity, which is weird because you also have like 8 wives at the same time. I don't know how you do that, but stuff like that, where it's like serious crimes, serious things that are wrong, but maybe not like worthy of death. All right. Anyway, so Joel, he finds out about what Ervil's trying to do back down in Mexico. He's not a fan. And seeing that Joel was not going to acquiesce to his demand to bring back blood atonement or develop another colony in Baja California, or at least transition one of their other colonies in Baja California into like this really cool Mormon resort that he wanted. Ervil founded the Church of the Firstborn of the Lamb of God because, again, no one in this family knows how to be concise with names. And so he names himself the president of this new church. He even actually recruited several of Joel's followers to switch sides and join him in his new church. So, of course, Ervil's primary policy in his new church was blood atonement. And the first person on this list that needed to be atoned for was his brother, Joel. And also, side note, like, I don't care how convincing or cool your church is. I'm not going to a church run by a guy named Ervil. It's just, I don't know. That's just me. Anyway, in 1972, Ervil instructed Daniel Ben Jordan and Gamaliel Rios, there we go. But he instructs them to carry out an assassination plot on Joel. Although Daniel Ben Jordan ended up being arrested for the murder, which carried out, he got it done. Jordan ended up being arrested for the murder. No one was actually brave enough to testify against him. And so he and Rios were set free. So now Ervil, with Joel out of the way and thinking that all of Joel's followers would flock to his church after Joel's death, was shocked, was absolutely floored to find that Joel's followers wanted Ervil to be arrested for the murder. And although he served a year in jail for his role in assassinating his brother, he ended up appealing the conviction and ended up getting set free early. But while he was in jail, Ervil wrote several pamphlets claiming that he was the Mormon one mighty and strong that Joseph Smith had prophesied about in 1832. And as God's earthly representative, he now had full control over who lived and who died. So he's literally just basically calling himself God and saying that he has full control to say who gets to live and who gets to die. And now officially a cult leader, right? So while all of this is going on, Joel's followers, they are still staying in their own church. And they had then elected Joel and Ervil's other brother, Verlin. What are these names? His other brother, Verlin, as the new leader of the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Times. And so when Verlin found out that Ervil wanted him dead as well, because, I don't know, Ervil just didn't want his brothers to have rival churches against him, so immediately just wanted them all dead, he goes into hiding. But he was quickly located and found at their other compound in Baja California, which I don't know why you're going to jointly owned properties. Like, of course, it's going to be the first place you look. Anyway, but to get Verlin out of hiding so that he could be killed, Ervil sent his 13th wife, who was also underage, by the way, and her 2 brothers to firebomb the house and shoot up the compound where Verlin was hiding. In all, in this attack, Ervil's underage 13th wife and her 2 brothers killed 2 people and injured 13 others, none of whom were Verlin, who by this time had actually escaped to Nicaragua. So, this woman named Noemi Zarate, who was the wife of a man who had actually fathered 2 of Ervil's wives. Now it's getting confusing. This woman, all right, who was married to a man who had 2 daughters, of which Ervil had married. All right, so kind of like one of Ervil's mother-in-laws, basically. She was so upset about this raid happening that she threatened to take this story to police, because somehow all of this is going on without authorities knowing about it. So in response, Ervil then goes to his 10th wife, Vonda White, and Vonda goes out to Noemi's house, kidnaps her, and kills her, all for threatening to take this public, and Ervil gets away with it. So in 1975 now, Ervil moves his family out of Mexico and over to San Diego, where he starts taking aim at other offshoot Mormon groups. And he starts threatening every polygamous leader he could find, and basically says, they need to either switch their allegiance to him and start tithing or get murdered, because that is almost certainly how Jesus would have handled business, if we're being honest. One of those leaders that Ervil went after was Robert Simons. And when Simons refused to let Ervil actually marry one of his daughters, which is a bold move, right? Like Ervil shows up and he's like, "Hey, Robert, here's the thing. I am the true one and mighty that Joseph Smith prophesied about. All right. There's no debate on that. Jesus told me that. God sent me a vision. I believe it. And there's nothing anyone can do about it. So here's what we're going to do. You and your followers are going to dissolve your church and become, pledge your allegiance to my church. And I'm also going to take one of your daughters as one of my wives. I think it's like number 16 at this point. It doesn't matter. If you refuse any of this, I'm going to kill you." And, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry. It's what God, it's just the way of the Lord, mysterious ways. Am I right? So obviously Robert Simons, he refused to let Ervil marry his daughter. And so in response, Ervil assassinated Robert Simons. 2 years later, in 1977, Ervil then ordered the death of his own teenage daughter, Rebecca, who was pregnant at the time, can't imagine why, and who was also threatening to tell police about all of the highly illegal stuff that Ervil was doing, like all of the hits that he was ordering, all of the probably underage rape that he was committing against his quote-unquote wives, all of it. So Ervil had her murdered. And so after Rebecca's death, Ervil then began crafting a plot to assassinate Rulon C. Allred, leader of the apostolic. I had it, and then my brain was like, no, you don't. The Apostolic United Brethren, which was one of the largest polygamous sects in the country, with the hope that doing so would finally lure Verlin out of hiding so that Ervil could then just kill him as well. So basically, he's just trying to do all of these things to piss off Verlin, to kill enough people to piss off Verlin that he finally comes out so that, Ervil could kill him as well. After convincing his 13th wife, Rena, and his own stepdaughter to kill Rulon, Ervil sent 3 of his followers to the funeral so that they could kill Verlin when he arrived. However, what they did not expect was a heavy police presence at the funeral of Rulon Allred. And so whether Verlin showed up or not became irrelevant, because the 3 hitmen that Ervil had sent down there couldn't do anything. So Finally, on June 1st, 1979, Ervil was captured by police in Mexico and was extradited back to the United States for his role in Rouland's death. He was sentenced to life in prison a year later and then died on August 16th, 1981. Ironically, Verlin ended up dying in a car crash 2 days later on August 18th in Mexico City. Now, that's basically the end of the story, but going to clean up some loose ends on this because there's just so much going on here. Prior to his death, Ervil wrote a 400-page version of his church's Bible that he called the Book of the New Covenant. This book contained a commandment to kill disobedient church members and actually listed 50 people by name who were marked for blood atonement. He then named his eldest son, Arturo, as his successor, who immediately went out to continue his father's work. Unlike Ervil, Arturo wasn't even remotely trying to hide how insane this cult church was and actually expanded the group's criminal activities from just being hitmen to now stealing cars. When one of Ervil's wives, Lorna Chenoweth, decided to leave the cult, Arturo had her killed by her own son. That's insane. So it's weird because of all the polygamy that's going on, but Lorna Chenoweth, basically stepmom number 12 to Arturo. She's like, okay, this is insane. I've had enough. I'm leaving. And so Arturo gets his own stepbrother, half-brother, I don't know, half-brother, to kill his own mother. And it's no issue at all with any of this. It's just business as usual for these people. Fortunately, though, Arturo's reign as the cult leader ended abruptly after he was murdered by a group of followers who wanted to leave the cult. And that's really how you got to do it, right? You got, if you want to leave, they're going to kill you. So why don't we just kill them first? And it worked. After Arturo's death, Ervil's oldest surviving son, Heber, was named the leader of the cult. The 20-year-old immediately sought to avenge Arturo's death and had 5 people, including 2 of Ervil's wives, 2 of his own stepmothers, killed by other people of the cult. At this point, though, Heber didn't really care about the Mormon side of the church, and instead just focused on marrying several of his own half-sisters and stepsisters. Now we're way off the rails, right? It still has roots in Mormonism, but even I don't know if this is still, yeah, it is. Screw it. This is all weird. So now I don't know, man, you're the leader of this pretty powerful cult. You can go and forcefully marry anyone you want, and you're choosing your own half-sisters and stepsisters. I don't know, it just seems pretty weird. It seems like a weird thing to do. In order to avoid any kind of repercussion from the Mexican government, Heber turned around and then pimped out his own sister wives to Mexican politicians. And we talk about, look, there's all kinds of things in the news and throughout history about how corrupt the Mexican government is. And for Mexican politicians to pay for sexual favors from a cult leader's sister wives, that's up there, man. That is up there. It's so funny. In 1987, Heber decided to try to get back into the American market and moved back to the United States to start a car theft ring with Ervil's remaining wives and children, leaving his brother Aaron in charge of the operation in Mexico. The following year, Heber orchestrated the murder of 4 people in 3 different locations in Texas. But then a few weeks later, both Heber and Aaron, along with their sister wives, were arrested for all of the murders that they had committed. Following the convictions, 6 of the youngest LeBaron children were placed in various foster homes around Utah. And in September of 1989, all of them disappeared on the same night and presumably have never been heard from since, which is a crazy, crazy end to this story. Where are they at? Where are the LeBarons now? I haven't seen any updates on this. No one still knows where they are. They're probably hiding under new identities. Maybe they're all banging each other in their weird little incest Mormon cult back in Mexico. Who knows? But just an insane, insane story. Our final story here, starting with the guy named John Singer, who was born in 1931 to German immigrants, who actually decided to move back to Germany from the United States before World War II started. And when the war started, John Singer enlisted as part of the Hitler Youth, which was basically this Mickey Mouse club for anti-Semites, is essentially what it was. When the war ended, though, John Singer immigrated back to the United States to New York to live with his aunt. He eventually moved out to Utah to start a new life. He opened a television repair business, converted to Mormonism, got married, started having a family. And John particularly liked the polygamist aspect of Mormonism, but he was eventually excommunicated from the church for not giving it up following the church's revised stance on the practice. Well, in March of 1973, John Singer decided to take his kids out of the public schools in Utah because, according to him, they were creating an environment of vulgarity, sex, and drug abuse, which included showing pictures of black and white children together. Oh, the horror. Can't be showing racially integrated people living in harmony. Jesus would be rolling in his grave if he was in the grave, but he didn't because he rose on the third day. Am I right? So, God, just, gross. This is where all that trans BS started. Like that's how far we've come as a society. Like 1970s, people were outraged over seeing black and white children living in harmony together. Now, if a boy wants to chop his wiener off and live as a girl, can't have him playing basketball on the basketball team because he's going to dominate. She's going to dominate. They're going to dominate. I don't know. It's all too confusing at this point. We're so far deep into it as a society. I can't keep up. Whatever. Just let people be, man. Who cares? No one cares. I'm going to go off on a tangent right now. No one has ever cared about girls' sports until dudes who didn't want their wieners anymore wanted to start playing them. Like, you go to a girls' basketball game, there's no one's there. Not even the parents show up to their own daughter's basketball games, right? I know this because that's what happened at my school. And I see it happen at other schools all around. Look at women's college sports. Look at the difference. Like selling out men's basketball arenas, 20,000 seat arenas. Women, not even selling out 5,000 seat arenas. It is bleak in there. And now we're going to care. Now we're going to care about women's sports. Really? Is that what this is really about? Really? Is it really? Is it really? It's not. Anyway, it's beside the point. So John Singer, he decides to take his kids out of public schools, and the state reluctantly allowed the Singers to homeschool their children, albeit under state mandated supervision. So for the next 6 years, Singer fought for full control of his kids before he was charged with neglect and child abuse, partially because he had decided to take a second wife and her 5 children, which made things a little crowded around the house. It's not like he's living in a mansion. So he's got his wife and their kids, plus he takes a second wife who already had 5 other kids. It's pretty packed in there. And at that point, the Utah government comes in and was like, yeah, dude, you can't be doing all this. So on October 19th, 1978, 3 Utah Highway Patrol officers raided the Singer's home, tackling John to the ground before the rest of the Singers swooped in to pull him away to get his gun. 3 months later, 10 Summit County Sheriff's officers raided the Singer's home again. And when John pulled out his gun, one officer shot and killed him. Now, all of that story was to set up this one. News of John Singer's death caught the attention of a guy named Addam Swapp, and it really moved him to take action. Swapp was born on April 6, 1961 in Salt Lake City. When his father introduced him to a small group of Mormons, Swapp was immediately hooked, especially on the whole polygamy part, because I don't know what delusional dudes are out there that thinks having more than one wife is a great idea. I love my wife, couldn't do 2 of her. Couldn't handle it. Not at all. Couldn't handle a completely different personality. Like, no, I can't. It's too much. It's too much. Like, 1 is enough. 1 is like the right amount, right? It's the Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. It is just right. 1, plenty. Don't need more than that. And yet you got these delusional dudes out there who are on these power trips like, yeah, I'm Ervil the Baron. I want 16 wives. Like, no, you don't need them. It's too much. It is too much. But Swapp became a huge fan of John Singer and his plight and his story. And so following his death, Addam Swapp went out to the Singer's family and ended up marrying 2 of John's daughters and fathered 6 kids between them. The Singers then invited Swapp to live with his sister wives and the rest of the family. And in 1987, Swapp began sending letters around the neighborhood demanding an apology for John's death, as if the neighborhood had something to do with it. His letters were completely ignored. But unbeknownst to everyone, Addam Swapp had actually received a message from God telling him that if he wanted John Singer to come back, certain things needed to be done. Namely, that he needed to plant a bomb on the Mormon church and blow it up, which, of course, that's what God would say, guys. Like, God's obviously an unhinged maniac who wants to bomb churches. Of course, that makes perfect sense. So on January 16th, 1988, Swapp and Vicky Singer, who was John's original first wife, detonated 50 pounds of dynamite inside a Mormon chapel in Marion, Utah. The group, after the explosion, the group ran back to their home to wait for law enforcement to come and get them. And by nightfall, 150 officers had surrounded the house. After a 9-day standoff where nothing happened, police sent Ogden Kraut, who was a family friend, to discuss a potential resolution to this issue. Swapp informed Kraut that everything absolutely 100% needed to come to a violent end in order for John Singer to be resurrected. So 3 days later, police decided to use a high-powered strobe light to distract Swapp long enough to send canine dogs in. Canine dogs is redundant. You know what I mean. But to send dogs into the house to drag him out. Swapp instead shot at the strobe light with his rifle. And when that happened, Lieutenant Fred House kind of assumed that this plan was working and that he was distracted and sent his dogs in. Well, John Timothy, one of John Singer's sons who had been confined to a wheelchair, he's sitting there standing guard. Well, sitting guard. He's in a wheelchair. I don't feel bad about that joke. These people are insane. He opened fire on the surrounding officers, actually killing Lieutenant Fred House. Officers then returned fire, hitting Addam Swapp and forcing him to surrender. Swapp was sentenced to 17 years in prison for bombing the Mormon church, plus another 15 for manslaughter after he was ultimately blamed for House's death. Swapp, however, didn't care because he believed the government was on the verge of collapse anyway and that he wouldn't be in prison very long because of it. However, he stayed there until 2013, and John Singer never came back to life. All right, part 1 of our little 2-part series on Mormons in the books. And God, yeah, like I said, the nicest group of people, but also the most unhinged and insane group of people. It's a weird relationship. Like, most of them pretty good, but it just seems like, and look, I get, like, all religious groups have their whackadoodles. Like Muslims have their extremist terrorist groups, and that's fine. Like, we've talked about those before. But, and God knows, like, Christians have their own dorky cult leader groups and all that. I don't know. It just seems like there's just a larger disparity in the Mormon church, because on one side, you've got a good group of people, super nice, really willing to help out in any way they can, as long as they're wearing their magic underwear and as long as they don't drink coffee or hot tea. But at the same time, it just seems like it's so much easier for really weird, culty, crazy people to come out of out of Mormons, right? Because, like, I don't know, maybe they just don't question things. And it's just like anyone can be like, yeah, God sent me a message and now I'm the leader. And people are just like, well, yeah, that seems plausible. God works in mysterious ways. And they just go with it. I don't know. It's crazy. But let's recap and see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number one, listen, if someone tells you that they are absolutely for sure 100% believe and know that Jesus is coming back on a certain date, don't believe them. Never has happened. 100% non-success rate, 100% failure rate is what I meant to say. You get what I mean. It's never working out. So Joseph Morris struck out on that one. Number two, the LeBaron family. What a bunch of dorks. What a bunch of crazy people. Just one of the most insane cult stories, I think, of all time. And just everything that they did, killing their own family members and their own sister, brother, stepchildren, wives, whatever they are. Just an absolutely insane story. And then number three, Addam Swapp. Really inspired by the stupidity of one other Mormon and also super infatuated with polygamy. Listen, here's the thing. Here's the real number three. Dudes, you don't need more than one wife. You don't. You don't. There's so many, like, what's the benefit? What's the benefit? There isn't one. You can't tell me there's one. There's not. Yeah, but you get to bang different ladies on different nights. Do you though? Do you? What? Woo! You think that's so great? Why? It all feels the same. It does. Probably. I'm guessing. Anyway, we're going to move on. Next week on Our Weird World, we are finishing up our 2-part series on Mormons, but don't worry, we'll have more stories later on. But 3 more stories covering Joyce McKinney, Arnold Potter, and Mark Hoffman. What did they do? It's also crazy things in the name of Mormonism. So we'll have fun with that next week. But thank you all for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends. Sorry if you're Mormon, but you probably knew all this anyway. And keep it weird. All I do is win, no matter what. What? Got money on my mind. I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they stay there. And they say, yeah. And they stay there. Up, down, up, down, up, down. 'Cause all I do is win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them stay there. Ludicrous going in on the verse, 'cause I never been defeated and I won't stop now. Keep your hands up, get 'em in the sky for the homies that didn't make it and my folks locked down. I never went nowhere, but they sayin' Luda's back. Blame it on that conjure, the hood call it Luda Nyak. And I'm on this foolish track, so I spit my foolish flow. My hands go up and down like strippers' booties go. My verses still be serving tight like a million virgins. Last time on the Khaled remix, now I'm on the original version. Can't never count me out, y'all better count me in. Got 20 bank accounts, accountants count me in. Make millions every year, the South's champion. 'Cause all I do is win. Heat in the kitchen, pot on the stove, water getting boiled, dope being sold. Snoopy in the hoopty, system overload. I've been running this rap game since I was 20 years old. I hung with the worst of 'em, bust till I burst 'em up, floss 'em up, toss 'em up, hard away, cross 'em up. Pardon me, I'm bossing up, pressure up, bless you, bruh. Don't mess with us, we like the U in the 80s. Back to back, set a trap, hit the lick, hit it back. Hit the trick, jump the track, I want my money back. Time and time again, while I'm sipping on this gin, Al Davis said it best, just win, baby, win.